Yay! Welcome again to Mantras for Peace, and welcome to Sheela Bringi. I'm so glad that you're willing to share your time and your voice with us today, Sheela. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Anandra.
Yeah. We've known each other, or like orbited around each other for a decade, maybe. I don't know, but we've never really gotten a chance to sit down and have a proper heart-to-heart conversation. But I just feel so excited to have you. You know, and if this was our excuse, I'm into it. But Sheela, if you don't, our viewers and listeners, if you don't know Sheela, she's just an incredible multi-instrumentalist and vocalist, and really an accomplished teacher, and you may or may, yeah, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm going to call you a lineage keeper. You are I feel like doing just such an incredible service of keeping the essence of the wisdom traditions of sacred sound coming out of India alive and fresh in America. And just props for, that's not an easy job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can we start there?
Sure.
With empathy for the challenge. And would you just be willing to share a little bit about what that's been like for you to do the teaching work that you do and the performance work that you do?
Sure, Ananda. Thank you. Yeah. I'll start off with just a little bit about my background.
Yeah.
So I'm coming to you from a little bit outside of Boulder, Colorado, and I grew up in a small mountain college town not far from here, Fort Collins, Colorado. And my parents are both from South India, and they're both scientists, musicians, and spiritual seekers. And they came to this country in the early 70s and moved to Colorado in the early 80s. And as you can imagine, at that time when I was born, there were very, very few Indian families in our town. And my mother was like the matriarch of our community. And so she would gather the community every Friday night in the basement of a kind of like a cold, unwelcoming church to sing bhajans.
Oh, wow.
And my brother and I used to protest every week, every Friday. We never wanted to go. We wanted to spend it with our friends or watching TV. To us, the sessions were like dry and boring, and we were not interested, and we rarely participated. And then when I was around 12 years old, my mom found out about the Saint Amma from a friend of ours that happened to be staying in our house, and she was cleaning his room, and she thought it was a picture of his mother. It was a beautiful picture of Amma, the hugging saint, Mata Amritanandamayi Devi, when she was young. And my mom asked him about it, and he told her who Amma was, and she decided in that moment she was going to take us to meet her. And it just so happened that she was coming to Santa Fe, New Mexico. So she put us all in the van, and we drove down to Santa Fe to meet Amma. And my first experience of her was walking in to see her singing, leading bhajans passionately, leading a group of a couple of hundred people in a big tent in the desert of New Mexico. And I remember
Where was that?
I was around 12, so it would have been like 95, 96, somewhere around there, mid-90s. Yeah. And I remember walking into the hall, and even though I was very young, I was immediately just completely floored by the music and by her singing. And I remember, like it was yesterday, like I remember feeling my heart and my mind just flooded with emotion. And it was as if she was cutting my mind and my heart open with the music. It touched me very deeply. And from then on, my experience of those basement kirtan sessions was completely transformed.
Wow. She lit the bhakti fire in you.
She did. She absolutely did.
It's contagious.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, you know, there was many things that happened, you know, one of which, you know, previous to that, and even through those years, like I struggled a lot with expressing myself. I often felt very frozen in my communication. I often felt it was hard for me to share my heart with others. You know, the place where I grew up is very white, and I was the only minority, sometimes in the whole school. And I had
one person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had pretty intense social anxiety. And after meeting Amma and feeling the power specifically of the music and of her singing and of her voice, like I saw an example of singing with so much abandon and passion and ecstasy. And I found that singing in that way, it naturally and spontaneously opened me up, right? It opened up love within me. It was to sound kind of cheesy, but it was something open in me.
You're in the right crowd for that
okay.
kind of talk. Yeah.
Yeah, and I found that, you know, singing bhajans and using my voice in that way also helped to open my communication up in other areas. And so, you know, though it was still a rough period of time, you know, growing up and my teen years and so forth, music was my refuge. Like, and especially after that light of bhakti was lit for me, you couldn't get me to stop leading kirtans at those Friday night bhajan sessions. And eventually they moved to our house and we became very dedicated to Amma. And so we learned lots and lots of Amma bhajans and had Amma satsang in our house and hosted the Swamis and stuff every year in Fort Collins. And so you know, even though I've studied from a young age other types of music, from Indian classical and Western classical and jazz music and creative music, that thread of bhakti and devotional music has inspired everything that I do. And it's the center of the music that I create and everything I do. So, yeah, after that, you couldn't get my brother. Even my brother, too, like, we revealed when we came back from Santa Fe, the next bhajan session we had in that church, my brother and I revealed that we knew the entire songbook. Even though we had never opened our mouths before, we knew every song by heart. And you could hardly get us to stop leading after that.
Oh, wow.
It truly was and is a refuge for me. Yeah. And, you know, for me also, it was a way to explore my identity and to figure out and what I could contribute to the world that was unique to me, you know. And it was through music that I could feel at home and like I belonged. And amidst all of the uncertainties of being a teenager and feeling like social anxiety and feeling, you know, being made fun of and this and that and feeling like I didn't fit in, like it was music that pulled me through. Yeah. So I have always been a bit of a boundary pusher. I've always been someone who loves to explore and innovate. I'm an Aquarian, and so it's always been,
and you're the daughter of your mother.
Yeah, that too, very much so. Yeah, and she was my first music teacher and my first singing teacher, and she sings in the Carnatic style of music, South Indian style of music. So that was my earliest training with her, was in Carnatic singing, and my father plays the mridangam, which is the South Indian classical drum. And so so every Sunday there would be like all the little Indian girls, we would have singing class with my mom, and all the little Indian boys would have mridangam class with my dad. It would be very cacophonous in our house on my dad, like he would, though I didn't study mridangam with him, he had such a huge influence on me in the sense of rhythm and meter and my sense of time. And he would make me like put tala for him while he would practice his mridangam lessons from his teacher, and make me like from a young age like put tala in 7 or 5 or an adi tala to 8 and stuff. And so that stuff, I'm just so grateful that I had that influence and grew up with that, because it influenced me so much. Just and the melody side too, from my mother, of course, with the Maya Maulava Gaula and the whole like early Carnatic lessons of singing, and you get very like used to the intervals of like Maya Maulava Gaula, which is the same as Bhairav in Hindustani music, and then combining that with the rhythm training and the tala, and it was just such a strong. I'm very grateful that I had that early Carnatic training. Honestly, it's very structured. I like how structured it is, and that the talas and the rhythm cycles are also like shorter. And so for me personally, my kind of like young, a little bit impatient mind, I could wrap my head around those rhythm cycles when I was younger. So anyway, so they both, played such a huge influence on me as my earliest teachers. And, but then, my mom also, she saw that I had a talent for piano. And so her first earnings as a college science teacher, she bought a piano for me and got me lessons. And then when I was like an early teenager, she saw that I was getting bored with the classical lessons, and I saw a jazz piano player at a wedding play, and I was like, what is he doing? Like, how does he know what to play? He's just spontaneously playing. Where's the music? Like, what's going on? He's singing while he's playing. What's he? And I was like, Mom, I want to learn how to do that. And so she just was so much my champion at that time, and just encouraged me so much, and made teachers accessible to me and drove me to lessons. And I just owe so much to both my parents. And so that early exposure also to jazz really sparked that kind of creativity within me. And so it was a way of like exploring all sides of me. And I've always been the most interested in that cultural exchange, like the exploring the common ground, connecting cultures and celebrating the differences, and using the universal language of music to explore that. That's always been my passion. And when I'm happiest is when I'm doing that.
Yeah. Well, I think that when that really comes across and what you do and how you do it. And I think what stands out for me is the personal transformative moment for you, where you were able to sit in your identity and express a unique contribution to the world through this music, which is your heritage from your culture, and then to be able to that you noticed that it was transformative in the wider sphere of your life and your empowerment with your voice. Really, yeah, I mean, I've noticed that too, of course, is like what's inside comes out, and you work on your voice, then you work on your voice in all the different dimensions and expressions that comes out as. And
oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. And I find that also, like by nature, I'm a little bit more introverted. And so like, a lot of the expansion into the online world is an edge for me. I'm much better like with small groups and in person and being more intimate with folks and stuff. And so I've noticed that as we expand more into online, and my partner and I started an online devotional music school called the Sacred Sound Lab in September, and so many amazing growth opportunities through that. And something I've noticed is that the more that I am despite my kind of introvertness or resistance necessarily to opening up in that way, the more that I do it and stay kind of centered and rooted in myself and listen to the voice that's coming through and how I want to speak and show up and share my voice through speaking, that actually it opens up my singing voice too. Like I notice that there's openings in my singing the more authentically I share my voice in a speaking way. And vice versa, I think, has also very been true in my life, for sure, which is the more that I sing and the more that I spend time in deep listening and in toning and in these like the meditative side of sound and of Nada yoga, as well as the more active and the creative and the kyal and all that, the more that the communication opens up. So I think it like feeds each other, and yeah. So you asked me earlier, you kind of like mentioned this about the teaching side, and I had the great fortune to attend the California Institute of the Arts, which is just outside of Los Angeles. Cal Arts it's called, and attend their Master of Indian Music, North Indian Music. Technically it's called World Music Performance with an emphasis in North Indian music, North Indian classical music. And so when I graduated from Cal Arts, you get this question I think that every arts grad has, which is, what am I going to do with this degree? How am I going to find an audience and cultivate relationships with fans and supporters and make a living doing what I love? How are we going to do that? So I started noticing, even before I graduated, I started noticing this kind of burgeoning of the kīrtan scene and yoga festivals.
LA is like the hotbed for
it is, right? That. So I started noticing that, and even before I graduated from music school, I started to get invitations and kind of put out some feelers and the West Side, and being a part of like some different yoga events and stuff, and the first time I led kīrtan in a kind of a Western yoga space. It was at a small yoga studio in Venice, and I brought a band of musicians from my music school to come and play kīrtans with me in Venice, and it was really fun. Like the music was really, really wonderful. It felt really good to me, and there was like a couple people in the audience who were participating, and it was really, really challenging. Like the music felt good, but the rest of it was so challenging because it was like, to me, it felt really like sterile, and it felt like, even though people were sweet, it was like I grew up singing, in our living room with family and friends facing the altar, and with food, and with like intimate relationships, like just like community, and so there was something about it that just felt really off. And ever since then, I've kind of always been looking for ways to bring, like, to be connected to the roots, and at the same time create adaptations for the modern day and for what the circumstances I found myself in were.
Yeah.
So like to do both
to serve the hunger of your participants who want to connect to what you are being an instrument of, but they might need some translation or some simplification musically.
Exactly.
Probably the big thing that you figured out with that, right? Exactly. So I've always it's always been this like little bit of this journey of like, how do we really celebrate the roots and embrace them, and at the same time create adaptations so that we can serve the communities. That's exactly right. And so I feel like that's been an exploration and a journey for the last like 15 years or something like that. And there's different things I've experimented with and explored, everything from
musical things like you were talking about, to seating arrangements, to food, to ticketing and tiers and sponsorships, just a whole range of things to experiment with and see, and what I learned is there are myriad ways to do this, to embrace the roots and to create adaptations and to make things more accessible. And so the same thing with my teaching, is same thing what I strive for is to I am not an Indian master. I'm not a master of raga singing or a guru of Indian classical music, and so I tell that to people right off the bat, and I really encourage people, if they feel really compelled and they really want to learn the classical side, to study with the Indian master, and yet I also at the same time try to create these connections between the different streams, so mantra and raga and kīrtan and bhajan, and the meditational side of Nada Yoga, and I know you do the same thing. So this is also inspiration both of us have, I know. So so as a teacher, I feel like it's the same. It's very similar. It's a similar exploration of how do we create accessibility and allow at the same time allow openness to innovation.
I could add something to that, which is a framework that I've been working with more consciously lately, is that there's a really clear difference between performative and interoceptive experiences. So if I'm there as a performer sharing my music, my setup and my objective is completely different than if I'm there to invite others into an experience of their music inside their own sensory experience, and if I'm there to help someone connect to the voice in their heart, but not listen to my voice, not listen to my heart voice, but to listen to their heart voice, it's it's a totally different strategy for teaching, and both are beautiful and valuable, but it's the what I'm really appreciating about what you're sharing is there is this kind of a constant negotiation between honoring, respecting, caring for the transmission of the art and culture that you are using as your tool to express, versus making it accessible, the adaptations that you have to do to make it accessible to someone who's not a musician, who didn't grow up in a family like yours of musicians, with people with stuff who don't speak the language of music or of mantra, but yet they're compelled to explore those tools. And I think you and I are on the same page, although I'm coming at it from the other side in a lot of ways, because I didn't have any of that growing up. I found it later, but have dedicated my adult life to it, and very much I'm very much navigating the same kind of east-west, old new bridge thing, and I don't know what do you think? I guess for me, I think it's it's less about finding the right mix than it is about continuing to be curiously asking the question and improvising the offering in the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I was really fortunate when I was younger. I had a teacher, my first teacher of the bansuri flute, and he taught in this way where he introduced somebody to a raga through devotional melody, actually.
Mm.
And really like access that person's heart and created like a really strong heart connection, and then got them interested into the classical side like over time. But it was like through the devotional side, and so like that sort of coming together of the raga and the kirtan, which is not really traditional, like generally classical, the classical and the devotional are not presented together generally. But for me, it was like just really natural, and I loved that mode of expression. And so, yeah, I think, and I take kind of a similar approach, because I feel like what people are yearning for, what I've observed anyway, is tools of moving greater into presence,
Mm-hmm.
and into letting like the mind fall into the heart,
Yeah.
and expressing themselves through their voice, and feeling like the voice is connected to something greater.
Mm.
Right? And which is like what some of the teachings of Nada Yoga with Vak and those things like help us to understand, that it is truly connected to something greater, and a path of exploring one's relationship to sound and to divine through sound. So, yeah, I feel like there's so much richness in all of the streams of sacred music, and all of the different the sonic streams, the kirtan, the bhajan, the raga singing, the mantra, and the nada yoga, and so I try to like create like a model where we explore those overlaps and alchemy, if you will, and yeah. So I kind of agree with you. It's a continual process of like staying connected to our teachers, and just continuing to like look inward and to serve.
Yeah, and that, I mean,
and meeting people.
and like it's I think it's a really brave work that you do in sharing that, and I'm so grateful that you do it, and that you're offering what you're offering in the way that you are, because it's like the fact that you're both really rooted in tradition, and even in this conversation you did that thing where every time you say something you're honoring your gurus, right? That is it's a cultural thing, and there's like a nod to reverence there, in just your knee-jerk response to the conversation, which I'm just appreciating so much, and yet you're also really just curious and adapting to how that can flow through, and I know that must be a challenge, and have been a challenge for you, being like growing up in a small town in Colorado as the only Indian family. Like, it's probably pretty lonely and weird.
Yeah.
But it speaks to me of the power, maybe the universality of music, and even the mantra, like people hear the mantra and they become attracted to it whether they understand the words or not. And
exactly. I mean, and I totally relate to that, because honestly it wasn't until I started like consciously studying more philosophy and more language and stuff, that I started even really understanding deeper meanings myself. You know, I think mostly when I was young, growing up, learning this stuff, I was just so attracted to the sound and the melodies and the resonance that I felt, that it really mattered not if I actually really understood the deeper meaning or not. You know, it was later when I was like, oh, maybe I should learn a bit more about this, you know, what the truth, like the deeper meanings. Up until probably my early 20s, it was not even, it was just the sound. It was just the raga and the rasa, and it just so deeply attracted to it. It's like, okay, the meaning's okay. So I kind of get it. I can relate to that.
Well, and I mean, I've spent a lot more time in the Indian kirtan, bhajan, classical music scene, like, than I have in the American scene. I've spent next to none in the American scene, and which is funny. It's ironic.
Yeah.
Right. That you and I are having this conversation, but I can say that my observation is that in India, when I've been to a kirtan or done mantra practice with people, whether as a participant or if I'm leading something, oftentimes it's really a rote, like the emphasis is the juice isn't there. You know, the bhakti rasa is often not there. It's like it can be a very kind of rote or mechanical, or like, we should be doing this. We think we know we're supposed to like this. We know we're supposed to feel something mystical and magical, but so we're doing it in hopes that we will. But until that living spark of the divine starts to pulse through the heart of the sound, you know, it just it's aspirational rather than embodied. You know, and I think what I'm capturing from what you're saying is like this beautiful storyline and an inspiration that, you know, you work with the voice, like you spend time in the practices, and then that does open up, whether you get it from a guru or you get it from the Shakti of the sound itself.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
Before that happens. You know, I wish that for everyone who's in love with mantra and sound, but to have the honor and the pleasure of even just hearing someone, like to hear you in a devotional communion moment, it sends that, the resonance of that, the tonal quality of a heart that's just splayed open to the divine is, it's a medicine, it's a magic that can spark that for others. So lucky you, and lucky your students and audiences who get to experience that through you.
Oh, well, that's so generous. Thank you. And beautifully expressed. That's definitely what I wish for myself in my practice, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and I feel really strongly that the arts, and I'm biased, I feel music is one of the most powerful ways that we communicate with each other as humans. And I feel like it's also one of the most powerful ways that we humanize each other.
Yeah.
And so I think that the power of the arts to foster greater empathy between humans and therefore more peace,
Mm-hmm.
incredibly powerful, you know.
Yes.
And as musicians and as artists, when we have a performance or a gig, or we're leading an event or facilitating an experience, we have the opportunity to take the participants or the listeners on a journey. And they have come because they've agreed and they've put their trust in us to be taken on a journey. So we get the opportunity to have a dialogue with people through music or through the arts or through poetry or theater or dance, whatever your medium is, that we probably wouldn't be able to have just in conversation or any other way. Like, I believe that through the arts we can have a kind of a dialogue that we can't have it otherwise, and we can engender greater empathy and humanization of each other, so that we can facilitate greater peace. And so that's where I'd like to put my energy, you know, and
Yeah.
and my focus. And
That feels like that's one of the that's a really nice way of elaborating on the concept of subtle activism, you know, that I refer to in this Mantras for Peace project. And that feels like a really great place to complete, to me. Like, you just bam laid it down. It's perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to that end, really, truly, may all the beings and all the worlds be happy.
Yes. Yes.